Thank you, Jackie. Can you see my presentation and hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. Today, I will be talking to you about the basic components of your septic system and some tips to help prolong the life of your system. First, just a couple of statistics on septic system prevalence in the US and in Maryland. In the US, more than 1 in 5 households depend on septic systems to treat their wastewater. And septic systems are used in suburban and rural areas that are not served by centralized public sewer, and they treat relatively small amounts of wastewater compared to centralized systems. We're focusing on septic education for homeowners in Maryland because 420,000 households have a septic system, and that's about 20% of the population. So there's just a lot of septic systems in Maryland. We want to help you protect your septic system because a well-functioning system helps to safeguard the health of our families and communities. We want to reduce the risk of exposure to pathogens through drinking and surface water sources that could potentially be impacted by wastewater. We also want to help protect the environment. Wastewater is high in nitrogen, which contributes to dead zone conditions, and our local shellfish beds can be negatively affected by pathogens from malfunctioning septic systems. Having a healthy septic system can also save you money. Decentralized systems helps to reduce large infrastructure and energy costs to collect and treat wastewater. The picture here is of the Marley Taylor Water Reclamation Facility that serves the community in Leonardtown, Maryland. Also, your septic system is the most expensive appliance in your home. And appliance in quotations because it's not what people normally think of as an appliance, because it's very out of sight, out of mind, and it's not actually in your home. We'll talk about pumping your system, and this is a relatively inexpensive way to help your system. It's kind of like changing the oil in your car regularly compared to replacing your entire system. So we're looking at a couple $100 compared to $6,000 to even $20,000 to replace a conventional system. And for the BAT system, which stands for Best Available Technology, that Andy will talk about later, we're talking about potentially even larger amounts of money. Many sites are also limited by space for a drain field, so we'll talk about how you can help protect that part of your septic system as well. So now I'll go through the basics of a conventional septic system. In your home, wastewater is generated by your washer, your sinks, your toilets, your dishwasher, and they all empty into this main line from your home. Your septic system components are located outside of your home. The first component after the main line from your house is the septic tank, and its primary function is to hold the wastewater long enough for the solids to settle down to the bottom, forming a sludge, while the oil and grease float, forming a scum layer. The tank helps to partially treat the wastewater before it goes to the drain field. You may have a 1 or 2 chamber tank depending on its age. More recent tanks are made of concrete, fiberglass, or polyethylene. Older tanks may even have been made of metal. The second major component is the junction box and drain field, and both are located after the tank. The junction box is also called the distribution box because it receives wastewater from the tank and distributes it into the series of perforated pipes that make up the drain field. The drain field's function is to slowly release the wastewater into the surrounding soil, where beneficial bacteria and filtration help to treat the water. Drain field pipes are typically installed 6 to 12 inches deep. So now I'm going to switch over to a web browser to share an animated interactive model of how a household septic system works that was developed by the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority in Texas. So Jackie, if you could just confirm again when I get it up here that it is showing. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes, we see the house right now.
Okay, awesome. So this is an animation that we'll share the link for, so you can click through and read all the different descriptions and information at a later time. For now, I'm just going to click on the bottom of the screen here on the icon that says to septic tank. So we're leaving the house and going to the tank, and you can see this is a 2-chambered tank with a baffle in the middle. And this animation is really fun because I'm going to click run the water. And you can see water entering the tank from the main line. It fills the first chamber and then the second out to the drain field, and you can see how the solids are settling out of the water. And there's even the fat scum layer here at the top. Now, we can also select malfunction, and we can see what happens when there's problems with clogging and things like that. So I think we can all imagine what happens when pipes clog and sewage backs up, and you can see even the brown line going up into your house. So this would be a really bad day for flowing into your basement or bubbling up in your yard. So let's go back to the presentation, and I will talk about some tips to help preserve the function of your system. And let's see. Okay, so if you're on this webinar, you probably know you have a septic tank. You may or may not know where it's located at. So I'm going to run a poll here. Oh, which actually I will run now. Okay. So if you could answer this poll about, do you know where your septic tank and drain field are? And then how do you feel before the start of this webinar about your knowledge on how to care for it? Give you about 15 more seconds here for the last few people to chime in. Okay, great. I'm going to close the poll here and I'll share the results with you guys. So it looks like the majority of people on this webinar know where their septic tank and drain field are, which is great. That's a great place to start. And then it looks like people are somewhat confident about their knowledge. And then other people kind of 50-50 here on we know a little bit or we feel like we need more information. That's great. Okay. So if you don't know where your septic tank and drain field are, one of the simplest ways you can locate it is through these risers on your property. And these are actually the septic risers from my yard. So they're usually plastic lids that cover plastic or concrete risers. And these are basically access or portholes kind of to your tank. So if you have a septic provider come out, they will open this up for when they pump your tank out. So if you have these in your yard, that's likely where your tank is. The drain field is a little bit more complicated or just harder to find, but your health department may have records because it's a permitted system. So there should be a site drawing or plans for where your drain field is. Older homes may not have records at your health department, so you may need to contact a septic provider to get assistance on locating that. But locating your drain field is really great because we're going to talk about different things you can do to help protect it. So you want to know where it's located at. So now that you know where your tank is, you're probably wondering how often should I get it pumped, because I mentioned that this is one of the best ways to help maintain your system. And it's recommended that you get your tank pumped every 3 to 5 years. And this frequency will depend on the following four main factors. So how big is your tank? How many people in your household generating wastewater? What amount of wastewater is entering your tank? And then what's the amount of solids in your wastewater? So if you look at this table, this will give you a general idea for the size of your tank and the number of people. And then if you kind of follow the X and Y axis, you'll see a recommended pumping frequency. So you can see that if you have a larger tank and you have a smaller number of people, you're looking at more like 4 to 5 years. If you have more people in a smaller tank, you're looking at 1 to 2 years. But really this depends on your personal usage. So one of the recommendations that I received as a new homeowner in Maryland was get it pumped when you move in, and then get it pumped in 2 years and see what the 2 to 3 years and see what the level is. Have a provider kind of give you a gauge for what the rate of how you're filling it, and then you'll kind of have an idea about what your household's usage is. Be sure to use a licensed septic hauler. Your local county health department can provide you with a list of properly, and that you have someone who knows what they're doing. I mentioned the BAT unit, so best available technology units. Andy's going to talk more about those. They do require more special pumping methods, and the frequency will depend on the unit. So you'll want to contact your service provider and the vendor to get more information if you do have a BAT system. So one of the first things that you can do to help protect your septic system is understand that your toilet and your septic system are not trash cans. So do not flush diapers, feminine hygiene products, wipes, even the flushable ones, cigarette butts, or any other items down the toilet. Problems with pipes clogging in your house or in your septic tank can occur, and if these items make it out of your tank, they could clog up the junction box. So you want to only flush toilet paper down the toilet, and remember that the amount of solid materials that I was just saying was one of the main factors for determining your pumping frequency. So if you're putting extra solids down, you're going to have to pump more frequently. I also thought this was interesting. This is from the Maryland Department of Environment. So the COVID-19 situation has been affecting us all this year, and shortages of toilet paper. So if you have to get creative with your toilet paper or alternative toilet papers, don't flush items that aren't toilet paper down the toilet. Throw them in the trash to dispose of them. So that's just a friendly reminder from them. You'll also want to think at the sink. So you want to avoid using your garbage disposal and not drain fats, oils, or grease. So increasing the load of solids into the tank, again, decreases the capacity and shortens the interval between your pumpings. So if you're using your garbage disposal, you're putting extra solids down your sink. Fats and oils can build up and clog the septic tank pipes. And if they do make it out of your tank, they can clog your drain field. You also want to use normal amounts of detergents and cleaners and avoid the use of harsh chemicals or large amounts of bleach and drain cleaners. These can be harmful to the beneficial bacteria in your tank and in your drain field. So you want to limit their use. Efficient water use also improves the operation of a septic system and reduces the risk of failure. Septic systems can only handle a specific amount of water. So you want to fix leaky faucets. You want to use water saving appliances and fixtures. So you can look for the Energy Star and Water Saver labels. And you also want to stagger your water use throughout the day and the week. So if your household is running the washer, the dishwasher, and using the shower at the same time, you risk a sewage backup or flooding your drain field. So when I talked about your tank being the first treatment for your wastewater, and that you want time for the solids to settle out. So if the solids are unable to settle and they enter your drain field, that can cause clogging. So you want to, that's one of the reasons for wanting to stagger your water use. You also want to avoid activities that can compact the soil of your drain field. So the EPA has this nice slogan, shield your field. You don't want to park or drive vehicles on your drain field. And mowing your lawn while the soil is wet can also cause compaction. And this is important because the soil is the filtering part of your wastewater treatment. And so if it's not able to allow water to soak in, you can have problems with percolation and that treatment on that side. You also don't want to plant trees near or on your drain field. Roots can clog the pipes, especially in drought conditions where that's the only water in the area, and they will move towards it. You also want to divert stormwater away from your drain field. This can include roof drains, water from sump pumps, and if you have one of these nice downspout diverters to get water away from your house, you'll want to direct that water to another place on your property, and make sure it's not towards your drain field. Excess water can slow down or stop the wastewater treatment process. So that's another thing to think about. So if you have a drain field or septic riser lids, there are different ways to landscape them and make them look nice. Here's some examples of more garden bed type decorations or landscaping, or just a simple mowed drain field works well too. Andy will talk about some of the more innovative systems. So you may have heard of a sand mound drain field. And so these are larger mounds. So kind of hiding those in your lawn can help make them more aesthetically pleasing. Some tips for how to do this. So you don't want to cover your drain field with fabric or plastic weed barriers. You want your soil to be aerated. Again, you don't want to plant trees near the tank or drain field. Mowing turf is great, just don't do it when the soil's wet. You don't want food gardens near your system just because of the potential risk for pathogen transfer. So you want to wear gloves when working near your drain field or septic tank gardens. We talked about overburdening your system, so you don't want plants that need a lot of water, and then you don't want excess water draining to your tank and drain field areas. So if you are going to landscape your tank system, keep those tips in mind. Here's a list of desirable plants for landscaping your drain fields. You want things with shallower roots, and native plants are great too because once they're established, they don't require excessive watering. So here's a variety of ground cover and grasses, and even wildflower meadow mixes are great too. And we can share these slides at the end of the presentation. So don't worry about trying to copy them down or anything like that. And these tips that I went through are from this EPA resource on septic smart home ownership. And they have all these great slogans to help you remember ways to protect your system. So we'll also be providing this handout as a resource, so you can teach other members of your household about things that they can do to help protect your system. And that's all that I had. Jackie, were there any questions that you wanted me to address now, or should we wait till Andy's done?
I think we're good now. Let's wait till we finish with Andy.
Okay, I will stop sharing then.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Nicole, for that introduction and really good tips to maintain your septic system. What I'd like to do now is to talk about some best available technology in the Bay Restoration Fund. I'm going to begin with a poll question first. Let me see. Well, that poll is not coming up. There we go. Let's see. There we go. No, that's not it either. For some reason, the poll is not coming up. I don't know why. Let me try it again. Ah, here we go. Somebody's helping me. It must be Jackie. Thank you. I'm not sure what happened.
I got your back.
Thank you. Thank you. It takes a team, and we got a good team. So thank you, Jackie. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of get an idea if you know anything about a BAT system. So we'll give you a couple of more seconds here. We got 30, almost getting everybody to participate. That's excellent. All right, 33 out of 37. Don't see any more coming in. Why don't we stop right there and share the results? Okay, so a few of you do, 15% of you do know about a BAT system. The majority of you don't, and that's a great thing that you're here, because that's what I want to share and talk about this evening. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Basically, BAT units are an advanced technology. In other states, they may be referred to as aerobic treatment units, ATU. In Maryland, we use the term best available technology, which is basically just that. It is the most sophisticated septic system that you can install, and it's all about trying to improve upon a traditional septic tank, which really is mostly for storage. You get some settling of solids. You get very little treatment in a conventional stored septic tank. However, a BAT unit is a lot more sophisticated. It's a highly more engineered system, and it's really designed to enhance Mother Nature's ability to break down wastes. So most of that action in a BAT unit is as a result of beneficial bacteria that are breaking down, feeding on the organic matter. And in order to do so, it requires a tremendous amount of oxygen. So all these BAT units are aerated units. So that's why if you'll have to have power, electrical power to a BAT unit. It's also important to note that the BAT unit only replaces the septic tank component of your system. You still will use your existing drain field. So if you're having issues with your drain field and your tank, you'd have to replace both of those. So again, the BAT unit is just replacing the septic tank component of your system. And these, again, were a big effort by the state MDE to reduce the amount of nitrogen coming off a septic system. MDE has permitted 11 particular units, BATs, and all of these units have to go through extensive field verification before they are approved in Maryland. And then I'll talk a little bit about the Bay Restoration Fund, which is an excellent grant program to help homeowners install and cover the costs of a BAT unit. So here's a schematic to kind of show you a little bit more of what I was talking about. It's basically an enhanced septic tank. And so you have here in this first chamber, water's coming from wastewater's coming from your home. It gets into this settling chamber. The sludge or solids settle down, just like the first compartment of a septic tank. Okay, the fats, oil, and greases or scum will float. All right, then it has a baffle, and then the clearer water with low solids goes over into the next chamber. And here's the aeration chamber. Okay, and aeration is provided by different means dependent upon the vendor. It could be a blower bubbling air, or it could be a propeller mixer. But it's all about feeding the bacteria with oxygen so that they can do their job breaking down the wastes. And so after it's mixed up and everything, it floats up into the next chamber, which is a settling tank or clarification chamber. And again, it allows the solids to settle. The clear water then goes over into the final pump chamber, and it's pumped out. That's the second reason you need electricity, not only for the aerator, but for the pump, and then it goes into your drain field. And a lot of systems will actually return from this area right here, and it goes back to either this portion or the aeration chamber to get more filtration, more nitrogen conversion, and more organic matter breakdown. So again, it could be a recycled system. The end result, though, is very clear and odorless effluent. Now, if you were to compare this nice jar of clean water that you can actually see through, if you were to compare this wastewater effluent from the BAT unit to a septic tank effluent, it's like this would be clear, the other would be almost a dark coffee color, if you will, grayish kind of coffee, because it's going to have a lot of suspended organic material in it. So a BAT unit not only reduces the nitrogen, which is one of the goals, but breaks down a lot of the organics as well. So you're loading your drain field with a lot less nitrogen, a lot less organics, potentially prolonging the lifespan of your drain field. Because once a drain field fails, it's very difficult, almost impossible to replace it. You have to build a new drain field in another portion of your property if you are lucky enough to have another portion of property. So that's why we really stress, and what Nicola was saying, protect that drain field. And a BAT unit is a mechanism to do that. So here's a process, a diagram of what goes on with wastewater. And without going into a lot of detail, basically what happens is most of the nitrogen from wastewater is in the form of ammonia, and then it gets into the septic tank. There's a little bit of breakdown there, and then it goes out into the drain field. Recall what Nicole was saying, the drain field, that soil is where most of the filtration goes on. So there's all types of beneficial bacteria, and some of those bacteria convert the nitrogen, the ammonia, to nitrate, and then there's other bacteria. As the wastewater percolates down through the soil, there's less oxygen. There's other bacteria that actually convert that nitrate, that NO3, to nitrogen gas, which then gets back up in the atmosphere, and our atmosphere is 78% nitrogen. So it's a really nice natural nitrogen cycle, if you will, if you have a good functioning system and you have ample soil that's aerated, and then low oxygen down here. So it's, again, can be very effective. And just some numbers to kind of give you an idea. Typical septic conventional tank removes only 5% of the nitrogen. BAT units that are approved in Maryland can remove 55 to 76% of the nitrogen. So obviously a highly significant improvement in nitrogen reduction. But also, when you think about nitrogen reduction, also think about organic material reduction. Again, you're loading your drain field with a lot less nitrogen and organics with a BAT unit. And a typical drain field, whatever that may be, a conventional trench system, gravel trench, if you have a at grade or a sand mound, you're getting roughly 20 to 40% removal of nitrogen. And then if you combine the BAT with the drain field, you're getting 66 to 86% of the nitrogen removal. So highly effective means of reducing nitrogen, reducing the potential impact to the environment. So MDE has a great series of resources on their website. This is one document in particular is what they call the BAT ranking document. And this is basically a graphical image of that. I'll walk you through that. This here on the bottom, you can see the different units that are approved. And then if you look at the blue bars of the cost, and so the costs range from about 11,500 on up to just under 18,000. And yes, they are more expensive, significantly more expensive than a septic tank, conventional septic tank, but you see the results, the benefits. And then the other thing here is that you can look at the numbers that you're seeing here are the percent of nitrogen reduction. So they vary from 55 to 77% nitrogen reduction, okay? Now, an important thing about the cost, Maryland's program, included in that cost is installation, which would be removal of the existing septic tank, or they would basically fill it so that it's no longer functioning. Just depends upon the site in the tank, whatever the case may be. But then it also includes a 2-year maintenance contract with a certified BAT service provider. And so you get 2 years of maintenance. And again, each system is different. Some systems require only once a year service, and a few of these systems require twice a year service. And that would include the pumping potentially. Again, depends upon your use. If you're heavily using your home, many occupants, obviously the solids are going to build up, and therefore you're going to have more frequent pumping, as Nicole mentioned. And then this next slide just gives a little bit more information from that BAT ranking document about electrical costs, because people think, well, I've had a conventional tank and I never had an electric bill on it. When you add a BAT, you're going to have electric costs, but actually, when you think about it, it's actually a fairly low cost of $2.50 to just under $19 a month, depending upon the unit that you have. That's in comparison. This higher amount is in comparison with say, for example, a clothes dryer. So it's, again, thinking about appliances for your home, it's comparable to, depending upon the type unit, a dryer, a more traditional dryer, that's probably less efficient. But again, when you think about $3 to $19 a month to treat your wastewater so that you're minimizing impact, reducing the amount of potential both environmental and public health, it's actually a very low price to pay. You can also see the operational costs here, the darker line. If you look at the right axis here, you can see the costs. It ranges about $175 to, say, just under $300, about $300 a year for your service contract. After that first 2 years that's free, then that's the amount that you would be investing in a septic system. Again, that is a fairly reasonable expense when you think about it. I mean, I pay $300 a year to have my 2 air conditioners serviced. So this would be comparable to that, dependent upon the unit or less. So it's a great document. And again, the Bay Restoration Fund, managed by MDE. Here's the link. You'll have access to all of these links, and you can read more about it. What I want to do is cover some of the basics here, because we're very fortunate to have this Bay Restoration Fund. And I've looked at other programs in the country, and this is actually Maryland's, to date, it's the most, I guess, the most funded program for homeowners that I'm aware of in the country, and more about that in a minute. So you're basically, it's funded by the $5 a month, $60 a year fee, and then it's all about, it's a cost share program, and very effective. The counties receive funding. So this program is managed by the counties. It's an MDE. They delegate authority to the county environmental health offices, health department, to basically run the BAT, Bay Restoration Fund program. And it's based on the amount of money that each county gets is based on the total number of septic systems and the number of systems in the critical area, and then also based on what the county actually specifically requests. So about $16 million a year are going into the fund BATs, and that's just, again, you know, a great resource for Maryland homeowners. Again, you've got to contact the local county office. More information on that in just a minute, because they are the ones that essentially run the program. And again, the grants are awarded from the fiscal year, from, you know, July through June, rather. Okay, and so there are, you know, like with any program, there are limits and special requirements that you have to follow, but they're very generous. And this last bullet just talks about, you know, that they have to be approved BAT units. And again, we have 11 units, okay? And there's a whole lot of information on the MDE site. So just a little bit about how the decision is made on who gets funds for a BAT unit, okay? Priority is given to failing systems, okay, in the critical areas, all right? And that is the whole basis. The first priority is trying to take care of failing systems that could most negatively influence water quality in the bay and its tributaries. So again, critical areas there. Next, if you're outside the critical areas, so you can still have a failing system outside the critical areas and still get funded. Third rank there is non-conforming systems. That's systems that no longer meet current code. Could be an outdated system, still maybe functioning properly, but maybe having some issues, or it's, you know, getting to the point where, you know, it's not meeting current requirements. And again, number 4, if it's again non-conforming but outside the critical areas, and then anything else basically for these last, you know, 5 and 6. Okay, new construction is possible, but it is lower on the rankings. So let's look at the funding eligibility, and this is where this program is exceptionally generous. So you can get 100% of the BAT unit covered if your household income is less than $300,000 a year. Okay, if you are over that limit, then it will pay 50%. It's also open to nonprofits, small businesses, and whether, you know, again, the different sizes, and even for larger business. So again, a very generous program, and it's all about getting BAT units in the ground to help reduce nitrogen, organics, and improve environmental health. So looking at to date, there's 15,000 BATs that have been installed. This is as of, I think, early this year, February, if I'm not mistaken. I've highlighted the 3 Southern Maryland counties: Calvert with 1,300 units, Charles with about 400, and then St. Mary's with a little over 1,000. Anne Arundel County has had the most units installed to date. So just a little information on where you are, where your county is in relation to the whole state. Again, a lot of units have been put in Southern Maryland. So one of the other beauties of this program, not only is there funding available and it's generous as far as the eligibility, there's a lot of great resources out there and a lot of great people to work with. And so here's some contact information for the 3 counties: Matt with Calvert County, Latoya with Charles, and Heather with St. Mary's. Again, you'll have access to this information. Great folks to work with, really trying to help homeowners with their septic systems and with this BAT program. There's also some, you know, additional funding assistance. Here's some examples here. Calvert County Environmental Commission with the Pump for the Bay, and then Charles County has a reimbursement program. And other counties do as well. In Maryland, they may have you know, a discount for pumping your tank, for example. So these are great programs. Encourage you to look into these things, take advantage of them. There's also a few federal programs, USDA and rural development. They have a low interest loan program. There's not that many grant programs out there, but there are some loan programs through USDA. So here's a you know, summary of key resources. Again, MDE has a tremendous amount of information on septic systems, as well as, you know, where to get information. You know, they even have approved vendors. They have, and your counties have specific lists of approved septic tank pumpers. So again, a wealth of information for you. So take advantage of all these resources. These links will be available to you. And I think I have one other poll question that I'd like to ask. Based on all the good news that we have with the BRF, do you plan on applying? I'll give you a few more. We still have some folks voting. Most of you have voted. That's great. Thank you. All right, there we have the results. So 30% of you saying yes, that's great. 42% saying no, and you may have several reasons for that. Maybe you already have one, and you want to learn more about it today. And then many of you, about a third again, are thinking about it. And so I encourage you to go to these resources. You can, you know, follow up with one of us. We can give you some more information, but certainly your local county environmental health folks, I mentioned the names, very helpful. They can give you some more insight as to, you know, the advantages. So again, thank you for your time, and we'll be glad to address any questions that you have at this time.
So thank you, Andy. Thank you, Nicole. I threw up a really a poll that we were going to put at the end of Nicole's presentation, so we're going to throw that up there. There were quite a few questions that I'm going to start with, and then if anybody wants to jump in and ask a question yourself, please feel free to. I will also be throwing up one last poll question as we're going through the questions. If you take a couple seconds, all it does is it's what we call our teaching effectiveness. It tells us how well we're doing at our communicating to everybody out there. It's very helpful for us. So if you take a couple seconds to do that, we would greatly appreciate it. So Nicole, you may want to unmute yourself so you and Andy can tag team this. So the first question that we have is from Jill, and she just wants to know if there are different size septic tanks that are out there, or are they all one size?
No, they actually come in various sizes, and it's, again, each septic system is designed based on your particular house. In other words, how many bedrooms, but also your soil conditions. Remember how important the soil is in treatment. So the county will come out and do a soil analysis. They'll look at your plans for your home, and then they'll determine what size tank you need based on the ability of that soil to perform. So a typical home will have maybe a 1,200 or a 1,500 gallon tank, but they come in, 2,000, 3,000. There's just a lot of variation. But again, think about it is that it's an engineered system specifically for your home.
So our next question, and I'm going to add to it, is the question is, how far from a tank should a vegetable garden be? And I would also add, how far from a drain field should a vegetable garden be?
Nicole, I'll take that one too, since I've been compiling a lot of information about landscaping and things like that. So that question has come up before, and I actually did a a quick literature review to try to find that information out, and I didn't find any specific distance. What was suggested in various papers was that you have to think about the plant and its root and the extent of that root system. But then you also have to think about the migration of the wastewater in your drain field. So, think about water is percolating down through the soil, but it's also moving outward laterally. It's very difficult to say specifically, but I have heard somebody else mention 25 feet minimum. But again, we're making some assumptions there. The tank itself it might be more reasonable or acceptable to have a garden closer to your septic tank than your drain field, because your septic tank, by design, if it's working properly, is a sealed environment. So there should not be any wastewater leaking from it. But to be on the safe side, you need to back away from that somewhat, but not as much as you would with the drain field.
Sorry, I'm muted. What is septic safe toilet paper? Is it just single ply?
Nicole, you want to take that one?
Sure. You might have more information, but I don't know that there is one that's better over the other. From talking with community members at events about septic concerns, there are people in our area who notice more clogging issues with super ultra Charmin kind of toilet paper, and they have better luck with lower ply toilet paper. But I don't know if there's a scientific study done on a specific brand or anything like that.
No, that's a great response, Nicole. And I have heard similar things, that if most toilet paper is fine, but think about what's going on. Paper needs to break down quickly, and so you could basically take I think there used to be a commercial about this with one of the brands. Putting something on a wet piece of toilet paper, and if it dissolves, breaks down quickly, that's probably going to be better than something that's kind of persistent. So there's no study that I'm aware of, but I have talked to a lot of people in the industry, and they say most toilet paper is fine. It's the wipes that are a big problem. They will flush. They say they're flushable. Some of them say they're septic safe, but that is incorrect. That is not a correct statement. They are not septic safe. So only toilet paper, as Nicole said.
So we have a question. It's not necessarily related to septic, I think, but it is underground. So I'm going to ask the question anyway. Are you aware of any way to fix or repair a failed dry well?
Well, repairing a dry well, you have to think about, why did it fail? Okay, typically what happens is that, with any drain field, any wastewater infiltration dispersal mechanism, dry well, drain field, cesspool, whatever the case may be, it's about getting the wastewater moving through the soil. And over time, because of the bacterial load, you can get what's called a scum or biofilm that can clog the soil pores. And if that happens, there's really not much you can do other than to, some cases I've heard where people would dig another dry well, channel the wastewater into that, let the old one dry out, and you might get a little bit more life out of that one. But again, that biofilm, once it's there, there's no chemical that's going to remove that biofilm. That's why you protect your drain field, your dispersal system. That is job number one for homeowners, is to protect that. Don't overload it. All those things that Nicole were saying. So no, there's no quick fix. It's usually replacement.
So our next question is, since many of us are getting more perishables with the pandemic, what is the best way to dispose of those gel packs? They suggest cutting them open. So my guessing is some people may be cutting them open and dumping them down the drain.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I have gel packs. So
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
those are things that they've, yeah, for keeping food cooler, I guess. No, absolutely not. You do not want to flush anything but toilet paper down your septic system. Again, you know, that would be probably a question that maybe the Environmental Health Office, MDE might have some guidance on that. But no, do not flush anything down the drain because it could harm your system.
So we had some questions, which I answered on the chat, but people were questioning where the critical area is. And just so that everybody knows, it's that first 1,000 feet of the shoreline on a tidal waterway. So if you live on the water and it's tidally influenced and you're in that first 1,000 feet, you are in the critical area. But if you really want to make sure, all of our county websites have maps that actually show the critical area delineation, and you can do a really quick check on the county websites to find those. Here's a good one. How long does a standard septic system last with an average size family, and how long a BAT system?
That is a great question. And I have talked to people all over the country and have heard that a number is about 30 years. But then that is, say, on average, because you have, I know of systems that are probably 50 going on 60 years old, okay? But I also know systems that have failed within 5 years, okay? Now that may be, you know, again, so there's a lot of range, depends upon use, depends upon soil, depends upon maintenance. You know, if you do not pump your septic system and those solids build up and flow out into your drain, it's going to fail. And so, you know, a conventional system, if you get 30 years out of it, that's great. The tank may actually last a lot longer than that. The drain field may or may not. Again, it depends upon the soil and your usage. A BAT unit, if you look at the construction of those are really durable systems, but they are just like anything else that's mechanical. It has to be maintained in order to keep it functioning properly, but also to prolong its life. But I know of BAT units that have been installed and they haven't had to be replaced, but they do have to be serviced regularly.
Okay, so what about a field or a piece of property that doesn't perk? Can you put a septic on it, and is a BAT and those funds for BAT eligible?
If soil doesn't perk, then, well, think about the reasons why. And that's typically because, well, you may have a very high water table, like we do in a lot of areas in Maryland, particularly on the shore, but also in Southern Maryland. But the soil may be so heavy that water can't infiltrate through it. And if you don't have any, the minimum requirement in Maryland is 4 feet of soil, you know, from the bottom of your septic drain field entry to the top of some limiting barrier. Say it's the water table or it's a hard pan of soil where the water can't, you know, infiltrate. So 4 feet. And, you know, if you have that 4 feet, great. But if you don't, then oftentimes you have to go up, and that's an at-grade or a sand mound to get that 4 feet. But but it all still has to percolate. If it's not percolating, you know, you don't really have many options for a septic system. So again, that's why site evaluation is so key, and the counties will go out there. And again, they'll make a recommendation. The soil, the quality of soil and the amount of soil, all right, plugs into that engineer design, okay? And that's the most critical portion of the design. Yeah, certainly it's important the number of people that live in the house, number of bedrooms, but again, if wastewater is not going to be able to perk or infiltrate in the soil, there's no treatment available, and a site would not be approved for a septic system. You'd have to, look into pump and haul, which is not the way to go. It's very inexpensive system. You'd have a holding tank or holding tanks, and it would be very expensive on a monthly basis for pumping.
And if you're interested in the Bay Restoration Fund and you have a site that doesn't percolate, so the Bay Restoration Fund is only replacing the tank. So if you have a drain field that doesn't percolate, you would be looking at the expense of an alternative drain field, like a mound or another location, unless you meet the low income requirement.
Okay, so our next question is how much on average, how much on average to get a septic pumped out, and will they check if the drain field is working correctly? I can say I had my septic pumped last month and it was $350, and that was in Calvert County. So Andy, I don't know when they're pumping, if you know the average rates, and do they actually check the drain field along with the tank?
Yeah, so a typical pumper they'll open it up, and they have this tool called a sludge judge, and it basically tells the amount of solids. And the recommendation is that you have your tank pump rather, when 30% of the volume is taken up by solids. Okay, and you mentioned 350. I've seen prices from 250 on up to 400. I've heard of a few instances where it's higher than that. Again, it depends upon the size tank. But if it's a typical house with a 1,200 or 1,500 gallon tank, you're going to see 250 to 400. You have to ask to have your drain field inspected. So, but a homeowner can see a lot of valuable clues if there's an issue. Obviously, if you've got wet spots or you have any odor whatsoever, that's an indication that there could be one of your trenches are clogged, for example, and water's not going through there, and it's overloading the other trenches and water is coming up. Could be they're all clogged, could be you have a crushed pipe for whatever reason, somebody drove over it, or I've had an instance where a tree root actually broke the pipe and cracked it, and water was coming up. That was an easy fix, fortunately. Cut the root out and replace that piece of pipe. So you have to ask, and service providers can inspect your system. The whole system, your septic system, your septic tank, and your drain field. If you ask them to do that, yes.
So this question, it's going to make me sad to read it. I have a pin oak, 10 years old, 70 feet tall. It just sounds beautiful to me. Roughly 10 feet from the end of my drain field box system. Should I remove it and plant another further away?
Wow. I'm with you, Jackie. That's probably a gorgeous tree, and yeah, I love trees, and it's interesting. I'm not too familiar with. Well, I am familiar with pin oak. I don't know what their root structure like is, but if it's anything like what I have had to deal with, and personally, with a water oak, where roots basically hit the wall of the house and went around a corner and went into a low area where there was, the rainwater kind of stood. The roots are just amazing what they can do. I can't imagine any way to move a tree of that size. What I would suggest is it might be of value to have somebody come out and look at that to be sure that there's no roots entering the end of that drain field. And if roots were getting close to the drain field, it could be that the roots are going away from it. But again, what a plant's like, nutrients and water, chances are those roots are going to your drain field. So what you could do is get it inspected, make sure there's no roots in I don't know what sort of drain field you have, but make sure there's no roots in any of the piping. And if there are, if you could cut them away, and then you could possibly put a root barrier in, which is, really heavy plastic, go down several feet, and that might discourage the roots from coming in. You might be able to save the tree that way. That would be my suggestion, again, to try to save that tree and protect your drain field.
Oh, so I got the one question that I always count on, and we got it a couple times. What about products like Ridex? Are they just a waste of money?
Well, I did a literature review on this actually, because this is a common question, as you said, Jackie. We get this all the time, and so the science out there. There's been studies on different products. So the science basically says that they are not providing any value to it in a septic system, and in fact, there's 2 of the products that were shown that actually suspend the solids more. So you're not getting that the suspended solids settling into that first chamber, and therefore they're going out into the drain field and could reduce the life of your drain field. They do work in a lab setting, but think about wastewater, okay? You're talking about literally billions of bacterial cells, beneficial bacteria as well as pathogenic bacteria, in a gallon. You're talking about trillions of bacteria in a gallon of common wastewater. Once you flush that toilet, you got all the bacteria in the world that you will ever need. And in fact, if you think about adding a box of 1 billion bacterial cells, when you've got 1,000, 1,500 gallons times 2 or 3 trillion bacteria per gallon, it's insignificant. So we just like to say that the science doesn't support that they provide any valuable function to septic systems.
Okay, Nicole, I think this came up in yours. Can you explain what the purpose of the risers on the septic tank are for?
So my understanding of the risers is to provide access to the tank for pumping and inspection and things like that.
All right. And then Andy, I think this is our last question that it wasn't a duplicate, so hopefully I haven't really missed anything. With our BAT, we have 9 small white caps throughout the yard. Are those for the drain field?
9 white small caps. So it could be for the type of drain field that you have, that there are viewports, and a lot of drain fields will have these. Your BAT unit won't have that. Your BAT unit will have risers that Nicole just talked about for servicing, okay? But the certain drain fields do have riser pipes, okay? And those are almost, you could call them inspection ports, so that the service provider will come out there and they'll open that cap up, and then they'll look at the level of wastewater in there, and it'll determine if the drain field is functioning properly. You could, if you're concerned with there may be emphasis on this white cap, the color. If you're concerned about that, you can, I've seen people that have kind of camouflaged them, if you will, painting them green. Or I've even seen somebody that has painted artificial grass on that. Maybe you could do a little landscaping that wouldn't interfere with the function, but might kind of get rid of the obvious white caps that you have in your yard. But that's a function, and that's design of your drain field.
So I think I do have one last one here. Earlier you spoke about, when we talked about the size of drain fields, or I'm sorry, the size of tanks. It was based on things like soil type, the number of people in the house, the number of bathrooms, etc. Is there a resource to help somebody determine that? Will the health department help do that? What's the resource that would help somebody determine that?
Yeah, so yes, the county environmental health office would be the resource to go to, because they basically take information, as I said earlier, the soils, the number of bedrooms, and the percolation. They'll do a perk test, they'll do a soil analysis, and all that information plugs into determining the amount of what's called the long-term acceptance rate of water, of wastewater, to infiltrate the soil. And from that number, then they can calculate the volume of the septic system and the volume of the drain field. Okay, so yes, definitely contact the county. They're a great resource and they have all that information. They're the ones that design the systems in most cases. Some systems may be designed by a private professional engineer, but in most cases, our systems are designed by the county, and they may have engineers on staff.
Well, I think that was our last question. So I'd like to thank you, Andy. Thank you, Nicole, this evening. For those of you that are still hanging on there, which is most everybody, so everybody was really interested in the questions, just want to let everybody know that you will receive an email with the web address of where you can find the recording from tonight and some of those resources that we spoke of. And again, if you need to reach out to any one of us, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Nicole, everybody.
You all have a great evening.